Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this next episode of the Recce Report. My name's Russ, former British Army Warrant Officer.
Evening, folks. My name's Cliff, former British Army Corporal. Welcome to episode 10 of the Recce Report, our monthly look back. Sorry, Russ is just shuffling the pack there. Our monthly look back at the state, capital S, of British politics. Now, Russ,
Has it been a quiet month again, mate? Has it?
Yes, it has. Now, I can't remember. Was the last Tory party chairman still in office when we did our last one?
It's hard to keep track, mate.
Number 10 needs to drop the old-fashioned door and just get revolving doors on that thing. That's a nightmare. Yes. So what unfortunately isn't a nightmare and is all too real is what was happening down in Liverpool just quite recently. Yeah. I believe it was a ultra right or far right protest.
I think what happened was it was initially a peaceful demonstration in support of the immigrants that were there, and I believe the far right nut jobs turned up to counter protest.
Right. Yeah, and then as we've seen time after time, country after country, when these type of people exercise their so-called democratic right to protest, they then try and stop everybody else from having any form of democratic rights.
It was horrific scenes, mate. Honestly, I can't believe, and the truth is, the people that are living in these places, they're already fleeing war and terror and poverty and and fear of persecution. And the last thing they need, and it wasn't even the people of Liverpool that did it. Scousers are renowned for their hospitality and welcoming nature. It was all the right wing idiots that had been bussed in, I believe.
Right. Yeah, and again, that is taking the lead from the administration that is sitting in Downing Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a horrendous report that I read through the last couple of weeks that Sunak and Braverman are about to unleash a set of rules that will make it completely impossible for people to claim asylum.
Yeah.
And very much so them doing that will then take us to the edge of what is acceptable underneath the European Convention on Human Rights.
Yeah, it seems that that's the ploy. I don't think. They've made no secret of the fact they want to be out of the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights. And I think the way they're going about it is, rather than us requesting to leave, they're just going to, enact so many laws that mean that we'll probably end up being kicked out of the ECHR anyway.
And that's a really scary thing that the Conservative Unionist Party are doing that, considering it was the statue poster boy of the Conservatives and Unionist Party that was a huge driving force in setting up. And of course, that was Winston Churchill.
Mm-hmm.
The irony is that it was deliberately set up. It's got nothing to do with the EU or the common market. Nothing to do with that. It was set up to prevent the rise of fascism again.
That's it. That you're absolutely right, mate. That was the sole purpose of it. Was the right for people to seek redress. To have a standard of human rights.
Yeah.
Which is why I kind of laugh when they talked about British rights, as if so either you're saying that British people are human, or they're more than human and deserve more rights. And the truth is that the whole point of human rights is that they are applicable across the board. But what they want to do is do it so that you can't protest, you can't strike. That'll be the big thing. The anti-union stuff. They hate things like the minimum working time directive. They hate things like the minimum wage policy. All of these things. They won't be happy, until we're back to Victorian times and sending children up chimneys.
Well, that's it. yeah, Russ. I mean, you think how many people were in prison? How many people died to get us the rights that we are enjoying just now, this minute?
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
a
too
bunch
many.
of far too many. And with us going back means those rights have to be clawed back again. So does that mean more people have to die? Before we get back to a standard that everybody should be enjoying. We're in 2023. Yeah,
It
surely there
is.
should be a.
Well, I completely agree with you, mate. But yes, the Tories are an overwhelming majority. They're until 2025 at least, because they've got rid of the Fixed Term Parliaments Act now, so they could call an election any time. They're not going to call an election now because they know they'll lose it. But the truth is, when we look at the two main parties at Westminster, Tory and Labour, Labour's not seem to be putting up much of a massive advert for them to do any better. They seem to agree on most things. What's his name? Starmer's talking about agreeing that we have to control immigration. He's talking about we have to make Brexit work. All these sort of things that were just right-wing talking points. I mean, remember we laughed about the controls and immigration mug that Labour put out, and we thought that was an aberration. No, they've embraced it with both hands as well, everybody.
Yeah. I've often said you cannot get a cigarette paper between the two parties these days.
Mm-hmm.
They are both, well, I mean, as the Conservative and Unionists have morphed into, let's be honest here, the new fascist party. And it's not a term I use lightly. As they have morphed into that, the Labour Party have morphed into the new Conservative Party.
Pretty much.
And none of the two of them will be any good for Scotland.
Yeah. And you hark back to that, all that stuff that happened in Liverpool is a direct consequence of the language that is being used by our politicians.
Yeah, I mean,
the demonization of the other.
Yes, and it's strange because it was almost the extreme people or people that were regarded as living on the extremes that did that type of thing. I mean, the BNP, Farage, and that horrendous poster that he had made up, and the fact that he was so popular in Scotland, they had to hide in a pub. And milkshakes were banned from sale while he was visiting. But that is now mainstay politics. And it's no point in us sitting here saying who votes for them. Obviously, lots of people vote for them. And is it truly what have they bought into it, or are they being sold a dummy?
Well, I think you're seeing how propaganda works in action. You say something often enough and loud enough, and the truth is, it's always been the case that if you can get your populace to blame someone else, to blame the poor, to blame the immigrant, to blame the asylum seeker, it takes the spotlight off the people that are actually to blame. Someone said that the other day. It's not the people in small boats you want to be worrying about. It's the people in luxury yachts.
Yeah, it's the people in luxury yachts are trying to convince us it's the people in the dinghies are the problem. And you're sitting there going, no, not at all. I've actually picked up on that line. I'm going to steal it from a show next Sunday.
Absolutely. That's Cliff's regular show on Caledon Radio on Sunday at what time, Cliff?
It's between the hours of midday and 1 o'clock. Veterans View.
Well done for getting the plug in, mate. Well done.
Hey. And once I'm able to suss out how to go live, and you get some time off, you will get invited on, buddy.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. We'll make it happen. It's the... I alluded before about the Overton window. For those that don't know what the Overton window is, I'm not going to go into a boring explanation, but it is effectively the theory behind what people will accept as policies at any one time. So imagine a window on top of the screen that moves around the screen. So you've got the left and the right, and it's what people will accept, and what each side tries to do is push that window a little bit towards their side every time, so that people will accept more left-wing policies or more right-wing policies. And obviously, being the Tories in power, they want to shift it for more right-wing policies. And generally, what happens is, in my experience, what I've witnessed is that each party nudges it a little bit. We've never really been far left, far right in this country. We've always been kind of centre left, centre right. And that Overton window's only ever kind of moved slightly either way. But the Tories this time seem to be wanting to just bang it right over there to things like, immigration and, and I'm not gonna make any comment on the whole sort of trans debate at the moment. We both have different ideas on that, but the idea now that Tories somehow are champions of women's right and prison reform is absolutely laughable.
Yeah. And
you
again,
know what I mean?
again, you encapsulated that with your use of the word populist.
Yeah.
Just as other countries are getting rid of their populist leaders. Yeah. We seem to be embracing it, and we've had a couple. It's not just one we've had in the shape of Johnson. Truss and Sunak, I would place as populist leaders. And it's always the case. Everything's fine and great until it's not fine and great, and then you see that there's absolutely no bedrock. They haven't built their policies on anything other than keeping the population away from the gates of Downing Street. That's what they're aiming to, whilst siphoning off as much money as they can.
And it's and part of it goes back to the old the old Roman times, bread and circuses, mate, isn't it?
Well,
or 1984, sideline the populace with gambling and football, and that'll be it. It really is. It's the next diversionary tactic from the Tories. And it's about demonising part of the population, immigrants, the poor. Gone from clapping for nurses to calling them, money grabbers because they want a decent pay rise. And teachers, teachers, nurses, and and railway workers. The people, all the people that actually kept us going throughout the whole pandemic, and we applauded, and now somehow are, I don't know, leeches on the public purse.
Well, there is only one reason why the public purse is fairly empty, and that's because of the scandalous budgetary effects that successive amateurs have done in the last 20 odd years.
And again, it's the influence of outside interests. It's not that you talk about the Tory party, but they're influenced by people, they're funded by their donors, which are people like the Taxpayers Alliance, who are that we don't know who funds them. They're the ones that want to cut taxes for the rich because somehow that will trickle down to the poorest, which doesn't happen.
Trickle down economy has never worked ever anywhere.
Oh, mate, the existence of one billionaire in a country shows you that trickle down economics doesn't work.
The Sunak and 10 of his ministers have received payment from the oil and gas industry to the value of £300,000. Now, I'm not saying that's an illegal payment. Apparently, it's all been, it's all above board. But then that surely does bring into question the where are those ministers' loyalty? Is it to the electorate, or is it to the oil and gas industry? This thing about not having a windfall tax, the scandalous thing that Shell never paid any tax on the first 3 quarters of last year because they didn't have a profit in the UK. It's absolutely scandalous. But that's the crazy tax system that we live in, or most of the people in this archipelago live in. Scotland's got a slightly sensible tax thing as far as we can arrange it for ourselves. Yeah, but and of course, talking of money, we have the ongoing event that is the BBC chair.
Him and Boris's cousin's best mate's best man, second auntie twice removed, or whatever, wasn't it? I can't remember.
Yeah.
But I'm being flippant, but yeah.
Yeah, the legal standpoint of that is that Sharp organised the loan, and somebody out in Canada lent Johnson £800,000, and it's reckoned to be a cousin of Johnson. So if it's a cousin, it's a family thing, so it doesn't have to be. Yeah. Well, I wonder how far back they went to get that family link in, because if you go back far enough in the generations, everybody in Canada is going to be related to somebody in the UK or in France. Yeah, it's just just the makeup, with of course the exception of the First Nation people. So yeah, well, it's scandalous. I mean, Richard Sharp, he I don't know if he lied to the cross-party group, or if he just omitted to tell them that this was going on whilst he was being considered. But apparently, this is the first media job he has had. Yeah, this is the very first media job he has ever had. He applied for, I think it was Radio 4 or something like that before, but he never even got to the interview stage. All right. So suddenly Johnson finds himself £800,000 richer, and why that guy needed £800,000, only he knows. And then suddenly the guy that helped broker the deal is chair of the BBC. Again, impartiality goes straight out the window. You know?
Oh, absolutely. It's cronyism. It always has been. On one hand, I've got to admit the Tories have never made any secret of the fact that they will promote their cronies. The House of Lords, Plum Jobs, head of BBC, and things like that. They've never been shy about it. But yeah, I think it's time for a change.
Yeah. That BBC job, by the way, is a part-time job. It's 4 days a week, and it's £165,000 a year pay.
Oh, mate, I wouldn't go to bed for that.
Oh, yeah, come on.
Sorry.
That's scary. You're absolutely right. They've never made any secret of it. They did try and sort of not have it out in the public so much, but digital age has caught up with them, I think.
Yeah. You hear the term compassionate conservatism, and I'm like, yeah, where? But it's an oxymoron, isn't it? It's like military intelligence.
Yes. Contradiction in terms, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. And if anybody in the Ink Corps is watching this, we apologise immediately.
Yeah, sorry, green slime.
Oh, jeepers. Right. Yeah. So, yes. So that is an ongoing thing. And the longer Sharp stays in office, or stays in his appointment, I think the more damage that will do, because it'll bring out other stuff. It seems to be a house of cards. It's not falling, but it's teetering a little bit, and one or two non-so.
Is it though? Because we've had a succession of people who are clearly awful people going into jobs, lasting a few months before getting sacked and being replaced by somebody equally as awful. The new deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, for example.
Yeah, 30p Anderson, isn't it, or 30p?
Yeah,
Lee,
30p Lee, the one who said that the reason people are having to visit food banks is because they're just bad at cooking and can't budget well enough. And that you can have a substantial meal for 30 pence.
Yes.
And then I think he put up like 2 Weetabix and some milk. But doesn't understand that in order to have 2 Weetabix, you need to buy a box of 24.
Yeah.
in order to have a splash of milk, you need to buy, a carton of milk.
Well, he also used Weatherspoons as a barometer about how the country's doing. If you walk,
Oh, yeah.
just go into a Weatherspoons, and if it's packed, the country's doing fine. If it's empty, we're in dire straits. Well, actually, Anderson, no, that is not it. When we're using food banks, and 5 miles over the horizon, we have got oil wells.
Yeah. Should I also point out that Lee Anderson, Tory Conservative Deputy Chairman, actually used to be a Labour councillor.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he left the Labour Party. I know he was suspended, first of all. So he was independent for a while. He was a cob on about, he wasn't a fan of gypsy travel, of travellers, called gypsies. I'm sorry if I'm offending anyone, the traveller community. He got really upset about a proposed area near him. Maybe that was one of the reasons, and then he joined the Conservative Party, and now he's more Tory than Tory, isn't he?
The zealot.
Oh, and his comments recently about wants to bring back the death penalty. Mate, I said Victorian times. I'm surprised he's not talking about sending us to the colonies for stealing a loaf of bread now.
No, the Minister for Culture is all for that one. Didn't she make a mention of it, Cromwell, and sending the jocks off to?
Oh, yeah.
So that's Sunak's appointment as culture minister. Yeah. How to annoy 6 million people. She did it in one sentence. But this goes back to the public purse again. Sunak, through the week there, created 4 new ministries. Now, the Institute for Government estimate that it's £15 million minimum for each startup, for each ministry. Then you can add on up to 340 million, getting things up and running and stuff like that.
Man, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's 4 new ministries that Sunak's created, and yet he's still getting back to our hard-pressed public service, public sector workers, and he's still turning around saying the coffers are empty.
It's the populism again, mate. I mean, we're laughing about 30p Lee and his death penalty thing, but I've seen people on social media now, that's a brilliant idea. We should really do that.
Yeah.
And I think it was one guy. There was one guy on social media claiming to be a former police detective inspector, saying there's a conversation to be had. No, mate, we had the conversation in the late 1950s, early 1960s, when people who were later proved to be innocent were executed.
Yeah.
Right? And as soon as you execute one innocent man, any argument you have for capital punishment goes out the window.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with you. Yeah, it's not a deterrent.
Or women, sorry. Don't want to be sexist.
Yeah. It's
deterrent. As proved by that famously crime-free nation, the United States of America.
With Gun Central, Texas being crime-free as well.
Yeah, there's absolutely no murders or crime in Texas, mate, because they have the death penalty and lots of guns.
Yes.
Mate, if you think capital punishment is a deterrent, then I'm sorry, you're an absolute moron.
Yeah. It's not often I agree with you, Russ, but I am. Yeah.
As Ian Hislop famously said on his Question Time appearance, it's not a deterrent if you're killing the wrong people.
Yes. Yeah. It's called murder.
Yeah.
Yeah. State-sponsored murder. No, but that is the level they've sunk to now.
Yeah.
Any competent people they have been held up in the sun in the daylight for being incredibly poor at doing tax returns, and they've had to go. I mean, come on. Surely a group of people that spend so much money educating their children could produce competent political leaders, for want of a better phrase. Yeah,
but they're weeded out before that, though, mate. That's the problem. It's a populist cabinet from a populist government.
Yeah.
So anyone that's got any sort of progressive ideas, even in conservatism, is going to be weeded out long before they get to that point.
Yeah.
I mean, does anyone think Liz Truss was actually ever held up as being the next president? She was a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
She was effectively put up there so that Rishi Sunak could walk in.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember the government we have now in place, or the Downing Street administration we have in place, is now twice removed from the voters.
Yeah.
Because that was Johnson that got voted in.
Hmm.
Then Truss came along. Was it Truss of 45 days or 50 days, however long it was. Japers.
Shortest serving prime minister ever.
Yeah.
That's one for the history books.
Yeah. Well, does she pick up that allowance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She still gets all the retirement resignation stuff. Yeah. It's a one day. Anyone, even who was your man that was chancellor for like a week as well? He gets all that as well.
Yes. I have, no offense meant to him, but I have struggled trying to pronounce his name unless I have it written in front of me. I can't pronounce it.
Is that who was it?
Kwang.
No, it wasn't Kwasi Kwarteng, was it?
Yes, it was.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly who it was.
Yeah.
He had sacked his chap and chapesses who were advising him on stuff from Whitehall, from the Treasury, and then went ahead with his devastating tax cuts. And again, getting back to 30p Anderson, 30p Lee, he started playing with words about that, saying it wasn't a U-turn, it was a change in direction. And that, you're sitting there. I mean, we're sitting there having a little bit of laugh about it now, Russ. Yeah. But who's actually believing that?
And this is what surprised me, mate, is that two things. One, that so many people seem to be supporting the Tories and still voting for them. That scares me. It scares me in the 21st century, when we are, we're less than 100 years from a world war that was all about getting rid of fascism. And we have people coming in now who would not look at a place in a brown shirt.
Yes. Yeah.
And two, that they're getting away with it. Yeah. Not just in England, but in Scotland. In Scotland, we're kind of squabbling here over, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. When in reality, this should be the time to mobilise, get people on board that actually the only way to get rid of the Tories, whether they be blue Tories or red Tories, is now to get behind the push for independence.
Yes. Yeah.
And let's get them to hell.
Yeah. Absolutely endorse that one. We need to start driving forward. I know the SNP have got their conference coming up halfway through March, but to find out what direction will be, they would suggest we move in. But we need to start pushing forward. You mentioned the next general election for Westminster no later than the beginning of 2025.
Yep.
Do we, as a democracy, for want of a better word, do we as a democracy have that much time left before our rights are completely removed?
Yeah.
And
as you say, mate, and Labour Party will be, vote Labour and we'll be better, mate. They won't. We've shown that we won't.
Yeah.
We've shown that we won't. We had the Blair years where it was all touchy feely Labour rights.
Yeah.
Scotland was still ignored. We got the Scottish Parliament, which was designed to shut up those nasty gnats.
Yeah.
And then forgotten about it again until we started making a noise. 2007 when the SNP got in.
Yeah.
And at that time, prior to that, we had some SSP members as well, didn't we, in the Scottish Parliament?
Yeah.
Until we started making noise, and then it was just shut out again.
Yeah.
Stand up, folks. Stand up and have your votes count.
Yeah. You do. Every single person in Scotland that has the chance of voting, please get registered. And every election, we need maximise the amount of people that turn out for the vote. Yeah. Russ, have you just looked the countdown?
We are at the end of our allotted slot again today, Cliff. That's going really quick. It's an absolute pleasure, mate, again, spending time here. And for everyone out there watching, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure spending this time with you. If you want to, we're available now on our Facebook page and on YouTube, so please feel free to catch up. Or if you're already catching up, thanks for catching up. And we'll see you again on the second Monday of the month next month, which will be the 13th of March. Right. So thank you, everyone. Take care and good night.
Good night, folks. Thanks a lot. As Russ said, it's always a pleasure.